Hello. This presentation or video is going to go through a little bit about the basics of Java to give you kind of an understanding of where Java started and why it's important as a programming language. And it's also going to walk you through creating your first Eclipse workspace and some of the things that you need to keep in mind when programming. So looking at Java, Java is what we call an object-oriented programming language. What exactly does that mean? So there are certain principles that Java must follow and maintain in the design of the language. So there's certain ways that Java is going to work, certain things that are going to be guaranteed that this is the way they interact and this is the way that you design, and kind of a mindset that you should have as you're going through and programming. Now, the basics that we go through at the beginning, you don't really need to understand what object-oriented programming means. But as we get into this, we'll start using the term object-oriented. You'll learn the three main principles and kind of the details about those three principles, just so that you know what they are: polymorphism, inheritance, and encapsulation. And you're probably saying, what in the world are those three things? We'll go through them in detail, give you plenty of examples. You'll understand how those three principles work together to make the programming language that is Java. And other programming languages are also based off of this idea or concept of object-oriented. And it's just kind of a design principle, a way to think when you're programming, organize what you're doing. So a little bit about the history of Java. The first release of Java, it's actually not that old of a programming language in terms of programming languages. Okay? The first release of Java came out, as you can see down here. It was what they call Development Kit 1.0. Its nickname was Oak, and it was released in 1996, January of 1996, I believe. It had 8 packages, which we're going to learn about in a few minutes, and a total of 212 classes. So it was relatively small. It was just starting out. A little bit over a year later, in February of 1997, JDK 1.1 was released, and you can see that it had more than doubled in the number of classes and in the number of packages. And then quickly, there were releases again in 1998, 2000, 2002, 2004, 2006, where it grew from the original 212 classes to 3,793 classes. So a big jump there in the number of classes. Now, what is a class? It's code that somebody else has already written for you that you can then use. So people have come along and said, hey, it'd be great if I had something that did this, right? Something that did this. And somebody's already gone ahead and written that. It's been tested. It's been approved by Java. And then it's released as part of the actual full Java package. And so Java 6 was a big release. Okay, notice that it is 1.6, but people started calling them Java 6. Java 7, Java 8 is actually the most current release. If you were going to go through and download it today, it would prompt you to use Java 8. A lot of the original classes that were designed here in Java 1, 1.1, 1.2 have actually been what they call deprecated, which means that they're no longer in use. They've been replaced by a much better class. And it's just that as things have evolved over the last 20, 30 years, things have gotten better. They've rethought the way that they're doing things. You get different releases. So in terms of what we're doing in this class, there's really going to be no difference in anything between Java 6, Java 7, and Java 8. And I believe on the machines at school, you'll find either Java 7 or Java 8 as the release. So quickly, as you can see, it's going to grow. We're actually using Java 7 or Java 8 at this point. So looking at this, why do we care at all? What's so special about Java? Why is it the language that we use? Well, Java is what we call an open source language. It means that it's shared and it's free for anybody who wants to use it. You don't have to pay to use it. 25, 30 years ago, if you wanted to use a programming language, you would pay a company, you would download their software, and then because you had that software, you could program in that language. Nowadays, programming languages are moving towards open source because nobody wants to pay for it, and they want their language to be accepted and to grow, and by making it free, people will program in it, it's going to grow. So Java is an open source programming language. Something else to think about is that these classes are designed to be shareable files. The idea is that they want to build an environment where people are programming in Java, they're designing new things, they're making it bigger and better, and that when you design something that you share it back with Java. You share it back with the developers, and then that gets kind of, once it gets approved, it gets added to the packages or it gets shared globally in the different releases, and that's why Java has grown so quickly over the last 25 to 30 years. And then the last thing you can see is that these packages. Well, the packages are just a way of organizing related classes. So if I have a whole bunch of classes that are all designed to help with math, some help with trig functions, others help with calc functions and things. So I might have a class that's devoted specifically to trigonometric functions, and I have another class that's devoted strictly to helping solve integrals. Well, those are related things. So you create a package, you organize them into package so that related files or related classes are in the same package. They're easy to find, they're easy to use. You don't have to go kind of searching through 4,000 different classes to figure out the one that you want. If you know you're working with math, you go to the math package and look at the classes that are involved in the math package. How does Java exactly work? And you should have a little bit of an understanding of this before you actually start working in Java. So Java source, that's going to be the code that you write. So you write some code. It's what we would call Java source code. Then you do what's called compiling, and compiling is checking your code to make sure that it's written correctly, that it's legal, that it makes sense, that the computer is going to be able to understand it. Once you've written your code and your file has been created, so your file .java, you'll see that's what's actually created and how you would save your file. You compile it, and then something called your code.class is created. And that's actually the code that's going to be run on the computer. So that code gets sent, the libraries over here they're talking about, these are those pre-written classes, the whatever version 1.7, it's what's already written out there is what we call the library. So all those classes are in the library. So it combines your file with the pre-written files. The Java virtual machine is what's actually installed to run your code and any classes that it needs. That's specific to your operating system and your hardware, and then that's actually what executes your code. So you write your code, you compile it, a .class file is created, which can only be read by the computers. It's not something that can be read by you or me. I can't open it and say, oh, I understand what you're doing. It's totally unreadable to the normal person. Then I go through, the Java virtual machine is going to combine your code with those classes to actually run your program. So to get started, we're going to use a program called Eclipse, and you can download Eclipse at home. It's totally free. You're going to go to eclipse.org. You'll walk through all those downloads. You'll also need to download Java 7 or Java 8, both of which you can just Google and find and download. And when you're downloading those, you want to download the JDK or develop software environment But to get started here at school, the first thing that you're going to do once you get done with this video is you're going to open your My Documents folder, create a new folder named APCP2 Program Workspace. The area that you program in is always going to, in Eclipse, is going to be called a workspace. It's important that you know where this folder is. You'll open Eclipse from the Applications menu, and it'll take a second. It's going to, before it fully opens, it's going to ask you to open up your workspace. And that's where you're going to click on Browse. You're going to go and find that folder that you just created. You're going to click OK, and then Eclipse will open. And the interns will be around to help walk you through this process. It's something that you need to get done correctly the first time. If you mess it up, you're going to end up with problems later on. And then this folder, anytime that you go and log on to a different computer on the network, your computer's not working, you sit at the computer next to you. You're working during lunch and you have to sit at a different computer. You're always going to need to go and open, and when you hit browse, find that folder that you just created. Okay? And you want to make sure that it's located in your My Documents. Sometimes you might have to hit browse if somebody else has been using your computer and has opened Eclipse, or if they've re-imaged the machines. You never, ever, ever want to create a workspace or use a folder on the school computers where when you hit browse and it shows the folder address, that it has the C drive listed. Because if something happens to that computer, you're not going to be able to get those files. If you try to log on to a different computer, you won't find those files. So you want to make sure that you're always using that folder that you created inside of your My Documents. Once you get Eclipse opened up, you'll see it kind of opens up with a little welcome screen. You can close out of that little welcome screen. Okay. There's a few different screens that you're going to see, a few different parts of the screen that you're going to see, and I'll go over those in a minute. Some things that you want to keep in mind as you're going through this. Class names. When you create your first class names are what is going to also be the name of your file. So it's very important that they always start with a capital letter. That's just the way Java always works. You want to make sure that all the words that are within that name also start with a capital letter. So if the name of your class has multiple words, like Hello World, both the H and the W should be capitalized. You never want to include spaces or start a class name with a number. And talking about naming conventions, as we go through and create different things, when you're naming classes, you're going to capitalize each word, no spaces, no underscores, so you might end up with a class name that looks something like this. And when we get to the point where we're creating variables and methods, use what's called camel case. It's a way of naming variables. It's very common in programming languages. Or camel case, where each new word is capitalized. So they start with a lowercase letter, so slightly different than classes, and then each other word is capitalized. Now normally you want variable names or class names to be short and descriptive. So both of these would not be great names, but I use them just as examples. And one thing, when you are creating a new class, you're going to be prompted with a little screen. You'll go to create a new class. You always want to make sure that you check off the little box next to where it says include public static void main. There's nothing else that you need to change other than typing in the name of the class, and make sure that you check off that you want to include public static void main. Because when your code actually goes through and runs, this is where it's going to look for code to actually start running your program. So what Java actually looks for is what is inside of this main method. And it has to be spelled exactly this way. It'll show up exactly this way. So the easy thing to do is just check off that box. It'll automatically get put into your file. You don't have to worry about adding it. And something that's really important is that Java is what is called case sensitive. So that means capitalization matters. So A is not the same as A. So if you capitalize like the word public in public class void main string args, it wouldn't find it, it wouldn't match, your code wouldn't run. So capitalization is very important. Java is case sensitive. A few other things before you get started, some important symbols. The semicolon always appears at the end of all statements. It's It's kind of like a period at the end of a sentence. And there are lots of different symbols that are always going to appear in pairs. Parentheses, square brackets, curly braces are always going to appear in pairs. And anytime that you use a curly brace, you should always put a comment after it, saying that this is going to be the end of my main method. This is going to be the end of a class. It kind of tells you that you've ended that section of code. And then at times, you're going to want to put information into your files that actually doesn't get run by the computer. And to do that, we put it in what's called a comment. And there are two different ways to do comments. If you just want to comment out a single line, you do 2 slashes and then put your comment. You can also do a multiple line comment where you put a slash and an asterisk, and then anything you write until the next asterisk and slash will be commented out. Very, 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 very important. At the top of every file you create in this class, you should be putting this header. Okay, you should have your first and last name, you should have the date submitted and what class period you're in, the name of the class that you created, and a description of the program. Saying this is a program that does something is not a description. It should say something more along the lines of, this is a simple program that displays information to the screen. This is a simple program that uses loops to display information to the screen. The description is there for you and me. If you're ever going back and looking to copy code from one program into a new program, by reading the description, you'll be able to know if you're in the right program. I know that's kind of a lot to try and take in. It'll make a little bit more sense as we go through it. And this has just been a brief introduction to Java and the Eclipse environment. Good luck.